Well, it's good to be back with you after last week. We got off to kind of a running start with the book of Revelation. And we did a little bit with Revelation and popular culture last week. Is this on so you can hear?
No, it's not
It's
on.
not on. Okay. Tech stuff is just sort of now is that on?
Yes. Okay, we got to make sure that we're up and running with all things here. All right.
You have 2 cups of coffee, 2 cups of coffee, Joe.
Oh my gosh, well, that, it's, in case it's a long session. All right, we'll work on that. I'll just use the little buttons. Yeah, that'll be fine. And where we started last time was after doing a little bit of work with Revelation and pop culture, and kind of getting a sense in which oftentimes just pieces of Revelation are put together with other parts of the Bible here and there to kind of create a scenario of the end times. We agreed that we'd just start reading chapter 1, and then chapter 2, and chapter 3. And when we did that, we got into the book a few chapters and found that in Revelation chapter 1, the very first vision you read in the book is a vision of the Christ who is present among the churches. I mean, it's a remarkable starting point. Sometimes biblical interpretation is the science of the obvious. Oh gosh, it's starting with the Christ who is present. That's pretty important. And then in the next 2 chapters, we get those messages to the 7 churches. And what's going on in those chapters where John is conveying this message to the churches, it's really saying, take a look at yourselves. Take a look at what's going on in the churches as it's seen through Christ's eyes. And when we looked at those 2 chapters, Revelation chapters 2 and 3, we could see some congregations struggling with different issues. I mean, in one congregation in Smyrna, people were really feeling harassed. They were feeling beleaguered. They were feeling marginalized. They were feeling vulnerable. And then at a congregation like Laodicea, they were just happy as could be. Complacent as could be. Life is good. Don't bother me. And at places like Pergamum in the middle, they were just trying to muddle along and not trying to compromise their integrity too badly while getting along with people in their society. And what's interesting is that we saw readers who were struggling, some who were way too comfortable, and some who were in between. And the whole thing was that if Revelation could speak to readers who were struggling anywhere along that spectrum back then, hopefully it can continue to speak to readers who are struggling anywhere along that spectrum even now. We left off when John took us to chapter 4. And John was saying, no, but before we get any further, you've taken a look at yourselves now. Where I want to take you next is to worship. And so in Revelation chapter 4, we saw a vision of God on the throne. God was introduced as the Creator. The God who is worshipped because God created all things, and by God's will they came into being and exist. Again, Revelation is sometimes the science of the obvious helps you. In Revelation chapter 4, the God you meet is the Creator. That sounds, well, yeah, we say that in Crete all the time, right? Revelation is regularly seen as a book that's all about the destruction of the planet. But the God you meet in Revelation is the God who brought all things into existence, the God in whose hands all things rest, the God who gives life to every living thing. This is the God you meet in Revelation, is not the God of destruction, but the God of creation. And John doesn't want you to get anywhere further along until you've come in contact with the Creator, whose will is life. And it's because of God's will in bringing life to all things, in bringing all things into being, that you find that whole heavenly company gathering around the throne, casting down their golden crowns around the glassy sea, singing, "Holy, holy, holy." Because the God they worship is the God who gives life, is the God of creation. by the time we finally get to New Jerusalem a couple of weeks from now, we're going to find out that the God whose will culminates in the Jerusalem is the God who makes all things new. That's the way in which the book of Revelation is framed. Chapter 4, people worship the God who makes all things. New Jerusalem, people praise the God who makes all things new, who renews the earth, who renews life, who brings resurrection out of death. That's the framing of the book, and everything in between has to be seen in light of those bookends. Now, we did a little bit of singing last time. We did a little singing, Holy, 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 but we talked about how often Revelation is put to music. Love Divine, All Loves Excelling is another one of those hymns that's based on Revelation chapter 4. So to kind of get our bearings again, we should sing the last couple of verses of Love Divine, All Loves Excelling. What you'll find is, come Almighty to deliver. Thee we would be always blessing, serve thee as thy hosts above, pray and praise thee without ceasing, glory in thy perfect love. So there we are in the heavenly throne room. The giveaway is this: changed from glory into glory, till in heaven we take our place, till we cast our crowns before thee. Anytime anybody in any hymn is casting down a golden crown, you're singing Revelation. It's the only place it occurs in the Bible. And so Love Divine is one of those hymns that is a shameless plagiarism of Revelation chapter 4. I love it nonetheless. So let's do a little bit of singing here. Come, Almighty, to deliver, let us all thy life receive. Suddenly return and never, never more thy temples leave. Thee we would be always blessing, serve thee as thy hosts above. Pray and praise thee without ceasing, glory in thy perfect love. Finish thy new creation, pure and spotless let us be. Let us see thy great salvation, perfectly restored in thee. Change from glory into glory, till in heaven we take our place, till we cast our crowns before thee, lost in wonder, love, and praise. You sound really good. I think you've got Revelation embedded in there someplace. It's one of the most interesting things, My mom was always nervous when I got doing stuff with Revelation because she was a little spooked by this book. But she loved Love Divine. She loved Holy, Holy, Holy. And that was a turning point. For so many people in our congregations, they may not read Revelation much, but they sing it all the time. And it's part of their native language of faith. And they don't know it. Well, let's take a look. I'd love to just sort of stay there, but we've got to keep moving along into Revelation chapter 5. So Revelation chapter 5 is where we're going to pick up now. So still a few Bibles if there's... Oh, there we go, once, twice. So here we go now. We're up there, so we're going to try to move along into the next section here. Then I saw in the right hand of the one seated on the throne a scroll, written on the inside and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" Well, there we are in heaven now. We've come to an important point in the book because clearly we've got God on the throne. God has got a scroll in his hand. And presumably, if there's a scroll in God's hand, it's got something important to say. One would think. that there's some expression of the will of God, some decree of God, some indication of what God's purposes might be, presumably are in that scroll. The problem is, it's sealed up. And the question is, who is worthy to open the scroll? Who is worthy to make the will of God known? Well, when you've got a major sort of a personnel issue like that, they did in Revelation what we typically do now is they formed a committee. And they did a search, one of these broad-ranging searches. If you look, the search committee, they were thorough. They did due diligence on everything. And they found out that no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. In other words, the search committee comes back, no recommendation. Well, now what do? John is bummed out. He begins to weep bitterly because the search committee has failed in its task. Who is worthy to make the will of God known? Well, it says in verse 5, "Then one of the elders said to me, 'Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals.'" Well, at this point in the book then, John has heard about this coming of the lion. And it's worth pausing here for just a second and noting what's happening. Because here again, we're getting introduced to one of the most characteristic features of Revelation. It's picture language. How does it use word pictures? Now here, there's this sense of expectation that's generated by this promise of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And okay, that starts to bring things to mind. I mean, there are certain connotations people in the ancient world would have had around the notion of lion. We've got notions of what a lion is. So, if you're doing sort of a simple poll, it's not a trick question, but so associations with the term lion.
Aslan.
Aslan, okay, so unpack that a little bit more. What are the traits of a lion?
Gentle and strong.
Okay, gentle and strong. Question about the gentle, strong, we got takers on that one. Okay.
Wild.
Yeah. Wild, okay, so kind of a wild beast. Yeah, is Aslan a tame lion? Well, not really. So a wild lion. Well, in terms of the animal kingdom, where does the lion rank? Good, okay, so your grandchildren are going to watch Disney, they're going to see the movie called The Lion King. Okay, you all know pop culture, that's all you need, is Walt Disney will give you exegetical clues to Revelation of his movie. So we've got the lion, so the lion is a powerful animal. The lion was the king of the beasts, king of the jungle, sort of noble animal. Of course it was a predator too, I mean it would prey on other creatures. That's the lion. Now, in biblical tradition, the lion, of course, had connotations of nobility. It was a regal animal. It was a kingly animal there, too. And the lion was the symbol of the tribe of Judah, which was the tribe which David came from. David was from Judah. To make sure we don't miss the point, the lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David. Okay, so we've got a sense in which here's the promise of somebody to come and rule, in the line of David. Somebody who's going to come to rule with strength and power and might. That's what we're getting in the promise of the lion.
Were there any lions in that part of the world?
There were, yeah. I mean, you'd find that there were lions. They would come up from Africa, and way back in antiquity, you find biblical imagery in the prophets and the Psalms and so on that talk about the lion. So it was a familiar beast, yeah. But now here's what's happening, is that John has heard about the coming of the lion. And John wants to get a good look at it. Okay? So here we go then, in chapter 5. Are you with me now? Here, verse 6, here we go. In verse 6 it says, "Then I saw." So John is now going to get a look at the lion. "Then I saw, between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, a..."
Slaughtered.
And you're wondering if it was a misprint. Because John is looking to see the L-I-O-N. And instead he sees an L-A. Okay, it's a four-letter word starting with L, but rather different. He's looking for a lion. He turns and he sees the lamb standing as if it had been slaughtered. Now this kind of does things to your mind. Because when you start thinking about what are the traits of a lamb? Mild, meek, vulnerable, cute. In biblical world, what did you use lambs for? Sacrifice. Okay, this lamb was slaughtered. Okay, so we've got a sacrificial animal, a vulnerable animal, something that's meek, mild. And so here we've got these two realities standing side by side. I mean, it kind of does whiplash to you, because John hears about the lion. What he sees is the lamb. Well, just sort of a quick question. Who's he talking about? Jesus. Okay. Was that real hard to figure out?
Not for us.
Okay. And of course, no. And even if you've been reading chapter 1, what does chapter 1, verse 1 says? Oh, this is a revelation of Jesus Christ. Okay. Lion of the tribe of Judah. Who do you suppose that might be? Root of David? Lamb? Could there be a connection? Yes. But what you've got are these two types of word pictures, side by side. Now, of course, is Jesus the lion or is he the lamb?
Yes.
Or is it yes? It's a both. That is Jesus the one whom God is sending? The one whom God is sending to rule with strength and power and might? Yes. The question is, how is the power of God unleashed? How is the power of the lion unleashed? In and through the suffering and death of the Lamb. That's how the power of God is unleashed. And what's so striking is from this point on in Revelation, the term lamb is the most common way Jesus will be identified. Chapter after chapter after chapter after chapter, rather than use the name Jesus, John will repeatedly talk about the Lamb, the Lamb, the Lamb, the Lamb, anchoring it in this vision of the Lamb who was slain. Now, to make sure we don't miss the point on all of this, if we keep reading in chapter 5, we'll find that in verse 7, he goes and he takes the scroll from the right hand of the one seated on the throne. In verse 8, then the four living creatures and 24 elders, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints, they sing a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals, for you were slaughtered, and by your blood you ransomed for God saints from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made of them to be a kingdom and priests serving our God. That's what the power of the Lamb's death does, is to redeem people for the kingdom of God, to bring people into relationship with God. That the power of God is the power of divine love, which is unleashed through the suffering and death of the Lamb. It's a redemptive form of power that's designed to bring people into God's kingdom through the power of Christ's self-sacrifice. It is power redefined. And what's so interesting is that when you get the sense of all of this, you realize that they have something to sing about. This new song, Worthy. Some of you may have heard this. Worthy is Christ, the Lamb who was slain, whose blood set us free to be people of God. Power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and blessing and glory are his. Some of you know this. Some of you have Revelation memorized, the musical version. And you probably didn't know that, or at least you weren't thinking about it every time that you would go to worship. But that's what you're doing, is that you're lifting up your voice in song to the one true God, Lord of heaven and earth, giving praise to Christ the Lamb, who's the one in whom God's power is unleashed for you, to bring you in through the power of divine love into God's kingdom. That's what Revelation is all about. If we're looking at all of this, again, all kinds of hymns based on Revelation chapter 5. Crowning with many crowns the Lamb upon his throne. That's another one of these paraphrases of the imagery in Revelation 5. Crowning with many crowns the Lamb upon his throne. Hark how the heavenly anthem drowns all music on its own. Awake my soul and sing of him who died for thee, and hail him as thy matchless King through all eternity. At the end of the chapter, it says, after you've got all of these creatures coming in, I heard the voice of many angels in verse 11, surrounding the throne, living creatures and elders, they numbered myriad and myriads, thousands of thousands, singing with full voice, worthy is Christ the Lamb who was slain. That's where they're doing it. Verse 13, every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea, and all that is in them, the entire creation, joins in singing to the one who is seated on the throne and to the Lamb, be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. And all the four living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshiped. This is this remarkable moment that we're 5 chapters into Revelation now. We're 5 chapters into Revelation. And so far we've encountered Christ present among the churches. We've encountered churches struggling with the challenges to their faith. We've seen God the Creator, and now we've been introduced to Christ the Lamb. And the resounding culmination of these first 5 chapters of the book is worship, involving the entire creation singing praise to God and the Lamb. That's God's will for the world, is that all things join in this harmonious praise to the God who has made it, to the Lamb who redeems people of every tribe and tongue and folk and nation, to make of them a kingdom and priests serving their God. That's where we end up, in chapter 5. Now, so far, just a quick question. Has it been real hard to track with Revelation thus far? No. You're doing okay? Okay. Sometimes people talk about it being a really confusing book. So far, you seem to be doing okay with it.
I wasn't here last week, and maybe I don't have the context down, but we've been scrutinizing word by word most of this, and then we jumped right past all of these sevens. This lamb has 7 horns and 7 eyes and 7 spirits. It sounds sort of new agey. What's that about?
All the 7 stuff. Yeah. Revelation, I mean, and this is one of those things where it's a field day when you actually try to artistically represent all of those things. My gosh, you get the 7-eyed lamb, it looks pretty strange. But what's interesting about it, in Revelation, 7 is a structuring device that you find all the way through. We're going to be finding the Lamb opening the 7 seals in just a second here now. We're going to be finding 7 trumpets later. You got the 7 churches. In Revelation, 7 is a number that indicates completeness. That you find it being used. If you've got the 7 churches, in a sense, you've got a sense of the church as a whole. What's being said to the 7 is really being said to the whole church. When you've got a sense of the sort of the 7 spirits, you've got in a sense the fullness of God's Spirit that's being indicated by that, and that's the connotations of the word 7. Yeah. As we keep going, then, it'd be fun to linger there in heaven for a while and continue the worship, but we better read on a little bit. As now in chapter 6, the Lamb is going to start opening some of those 7 seals, and one after another. He's going to be doing it, and we'll have to see what happens next. In chapter 6 it says, "Then I saw the Lamb open one of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures call out as with a voice of thunder, 'Come.' I looked, and there was a white horse. Its rider had a bow, a crown was given to him, And he came out conquering and to conquer. Well, let me bring up a little illustration here. Here we got a woodcut of the 4 horsemen. Hopefully it's big enough that you can see it there. I'm going back to Albrecht Dürer again. And Dürer was the one who did these woodcuts back around 1500, 1498 to 1500 in there. And Dürer gives us a pretty good sense of the imagery in this chapter. Now, what I find intriguing about this image of the 4 horsemen that come galloping out of the pages when you get to this point in the book is that everybody agrees that it again is picture language. Now, I say this because sometimes we get into this us versus them mentality, where the folks will say, well, we've got the folks who take the Bible literally, and we've got the folks who sort of think it's all symbolic. And I mean, even when I was reading through the Left Behind series, okay, so I'm paging my way through the Left Behind series, trying to get the best sort of futuristic interpretations of all of this. And in the second volume of the Left Behind series, we're rolling on through there, and the Christians have been raptured up to heaven, and we've got all of the unbelievers or the half-hearted believers who are still left on earth. They're trying to figure out what's going on. There's one guy down there that says, oh my gosh, we should have been taking the Bible literally. I mean, how in the world could we have missed out so badly on all this? You've got to take it literally, 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 literally. Now, when we get to the part of Revelation that talks about the 4 horsemen, those are all symbolic. And I'm thinking, oh, how interesting. And Left Behind it says, it's all literal, 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 literal. Now, these are all symbols. Yes, I agree. That not even the most literalistic interpreters, are saying that we're sort of waiting for CNN to pick up these 4 horsemen. I mean, they're not waiting to say that you got the roving reporter in the street, oh my gosh, here we got these 4 horsemen, they're prancing down Pennsylvania Avenue, they're heading straight to the White House, got the sky with the wall, he's heading right there, it's going to be the end of the world. No. Nobody is waiting for CNN to pick that up on its cameras. No.
Just on Fox.
That everybody agrees this is picture language. The question is, and that's important because this is common ground, the question is, what does the picture language mean? That's so interesting. Now, as I'm looking at this, what I find interesting about Dürer's presentation is, I think that Dürer was not simply a good artist, but he was actually a pretty good reader of the Bible. And what I find interesting is that horseman number 1 is the one way in the back. That horseman number 1, that's this guy back here who's got a bow in his hand. He's the one that's farthest away from you. I think that's really interesting. If we ask what the horseman signifies, Revelation will go on to say that this horseman came out conquering and to conquer. Okay, horseman signifies conquest. Okay, we've got that. Well, conquest is what happens out at the borders. Conquest is what happens when one people overrun the boundaries of another people, when one nation overruns the boundaries of another nation. It's what happens out there at the borders. That's where conquest takes place. And what Revelation is doing is raising that unsettling question for readers in his own time. How secure are you as a nation? Now, in many ways, that would have been a ridiculous question. That would have been a ridiculous thing. I mean, John and his readers were living in the most secure nation on the planet, the Roman Empire. I mean, so why would you even ask? We do the conquering. We are never conquered. We've got the biggest military. We've got the biggest military budget. We've got the most advanced technology. We are the ones of whom the world is in terror. But then that interesting question comes up is, oh, really? You're invulnerable? Really? Could it be that Rome had the biggest military budget, that Rome had the biggest, most sophisticated military technology, not because they felt so secure, but precisely because they didn't? And what Revelation is doing is raising that unsettling prospect. How secure are you, really? Now, the next horseman comes a step closer to you. And I think that's exactly right. Because when you go on and keep reading in Revelation chapter 6, in Revelation chapter 6, verse 3, when he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature call out, "Come," and out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth. And then look at what it says. So that people would slaughter who? One another. And he was given a great sword. What's interesting is that this now is talking about the violence that people do to one another. It's not simply something out there, one nation versus another nation. It's not simply something out there at the border. It has to do with the violence that people do to one another. It raises that unsettling question, and so how secure are you where you live? How secure are you in your own community? How secure are you in your own neighborhood? I mean, for people back in John's time, that would have been a sobering kind of question. I mean, I put myself in a city like Ephesus or a city like Smyrna. I mean, those were harbor cities. Would you really want to send your 16-year-old kids down to the waterfront after dark? Probably not. Things happen. Do you really want to be along the streets after dark? Things happen. Violence was a part of society. It was embedded in cultural relationships. It was, how secure are you, really? Now, what I find entertaining is that this is the horseman. Horseman number 3 is the one that my eye always catches first. Because that's the horseman smack dab in the middle of the picture who's far and away the biggest. And this horseman has to do with your pocketbook. It has to do with finance. It has to do with money. It has to do with your ability to put bread on the table. And that's where we come to in this next one. In chapter 6, verse 5, it says, "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature call out, 'Come.' And there was a black horse. Its rider held a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the 4 living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a day's pay,'" or the Greek would be denarius, "and 3 quarts of barley for a day's pay," or a denarius. But don't damage the olive oil in the wine. Odd. I mean, what it's talking about is economic vulnerability in the third one there. I mean, it's talking about, it's asking, I mean, how secure are you just in terms of your own income, your own ability to put bread on the table? I mean, it's, okay, the economy had its ups and downs back in the ancient world. Hard to believe, I know, but it did. And sometimes people, ran into some difficulties in basically feeding their families, If you're thinking about a quart of wheat, and if you're just basically got it, entry-level job kind of thing, you're gonna make a denarius a day. That's what you're gonna do. And you're gonna spend your whole day's pay to buy that quart full of wheat. Now, if you ground that up and made flour out of it and baked bread out of it, I mean, how much bread could you make out of a quart of wheat? A couple of loaves, maybe? Something? It's, you know, if you got a small family, you probably better get the 3 quarts of barley. That was a little cheaper. You could cook up some porridge or something for them to eat. I mean, a little something, put bread on the table for the kids, but you're certainly not going to be gaining a whole lot of weight on this kind of a diet. Obesity was not going to be a problem with this kind of a food shortage. I mean, fine, you still got oil and wine on the shelves, but who can afford to buy it if you've been blowing your entire paycheck just to put bread on the table? And that's the interesting question. You know, how secure are you in terms of your own ability to put bread on the table? Now, the last horseman, the 4th horseman, is this one right here. And it's the one you might not see right away. But this is the one that sort of brings the threats right out here into your lap. Because this is the horseman that represents death. And down here in the corner is a creature with a wide open mouth. And this is Sheol, or Hades. Like in the Old Testament, it will say that Sheol has opened wide its mouth. Sheol was the realm of the dead. Hades was the realm of the dead. In John's world, Hades wasn't hell, like in terms of fiery torment. It was the place where all the dead go for a while until the last judgment. That was the way he would talk about it. And what's interesting, here you've got this king who's being gobbled up by Sheol here as death rides by. I mean, there's a sense in which no one, regardless of rank or wealth or power or prestige, no one is finally exempt from the 4th horseman. Now, what I find intriguing about this is the way the 4 horsemen function as picture language, kind of stripping away those pretensions that everything's just fine, thank you. I mean, with one after another, after another, after another, they raise these disturbing questions. How secure are you as a nation? How secure are you in your own community? How secure are you economically? How secure are you in terms of your own life, your own health? I also find it interesting to ask, would those horsemen have been real for people of John's time? Would they have represented threats that are real? I mean, certainly violence was a reality. Food shortages, did people in Ephesus and Smyrna ever have to worry about feeding their families? Did they ever worry about death? Would people in 21st century of America ever worry about national security? Anybody in Minneapolis ever have issues around violence? Whether in the streets or domestic violence, I mean, the violence we do to one another. Now, the economy wouldn't be an American issue. We would never be terribly concerned about economic issues. Or is that what we're obsessed about? I mean, I think that's why Durer puts it in the middle. That if you're going to obsess about anything, it's going to be the economy, I think. So, I mean, Durer's got a sense of humor, I think, of this. You know, it was interesting. Once I was teaching, doing an overview of Revelation out in Silicon Valley. And it was just incredible, you know. Because I had these people with these incredible wage jobs. I mean, it was making phenomenal sums and living in these houses that, I don't know if you could get one for less than $1 million, but. And what was interesting is this was the horseman that they looked at. So I think, well, wait a second, you got these high-paying jobs, you got these incredibly expensive houses, and they say, yeah, we've got zero job security. You know, it could, if the tech things tanks, I mean, we could be out on the street before you know it. I mean, it's just kind of, it's a roller coaster kind of thing in the world we live in. I thought, that's so interesting. That's so interesting. Well, one after another, after another, after another, these horsemen bring the threats out, and what I find so powerful about them is that they represent threats that are real. They were real for people in John's time. They're real for people in our time. They're not limited to just one time and place, but where would you put them on a timeline? I mean, if you're trying to script the end of the age, well, my gosh, when hasn't there been a threat of conquest? When hasn't the violence been an issue? When hasn't the economy been unstable? I mean, it's like, my gosh. But that's where Revelation does this work of stripping away these pretensions that everything's fine, thank you, I'm doing just fine, thank you, no problem, thank you. But then, as it keeps going with one threat after another, after another, after another, by the time we get to chapter 6, verse 9, it says, when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slaughtered for the word of God and for the testimony they had given. John's now giving voice to the victims of violence. He's giving voice to the innocent who have suffered violence, who have lost their lives. And they cried out, Sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long will it be before you judge and avenge our blood on the inhabitants of the earth? In other words, how long must this violence continue? How long must the innocent suffer? How long must the vulnerable remain vulnerable to be preyed on by the powerful? In verse 12, it sounds like maybe the judgment is actually coming to pass. Because we begin to get the sense that God is about to rock the entire world, to shake up the entire world order, to bring all of these sorts of threats to their culmination. In chapter 6, verse 12, it says, when he opened the sixth seal, I looked, and there came a great earthquake. The sun became black as sackcloth. The full moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as when a fig tree drops its winter fruit, as when shaken by a gale. The sky vanished like a scroll, rolling itself up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. The kings of the earth and the magnates and the generals and the rich and the powerful and everyone slave and free hid in the caves and among the rocks and the mountains, calling the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the wrath of the one who's seated on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb, for the great day of their wrath has come. Who can stand this? Who is able to stand in the face of such threatening circumstances? One of the things that is most remarkable about this part of Revelation is that we've been rolling along, and if you've been following along with all of this, this is exactly where it's going to be taking you, with one thread after another, after another, after another, and you're beginning to think, who can stand this? And then what happens? Then what happens is that there's an angel from heaven that says, wait, hold it, wait. They're asking a great question. And if they're asking a great question, they deserve an answer. And so just as we're waiting for that seventh seal to open, as we're waiting for the entire creation to come exploding apart, the angel says, oh, forget it. In chapter 7, after this I saw four angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, so that no wind could blow on earth or sea or against any tree. I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun, having the seal of the living God. He called out with a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to damage earth and sea, saying, don't do it. Back off, will ya? Forget the carnage. No more tsunamis. We're done with this stuff now.
Well, now, wait a second. Yes,
Until we have marked the servant of our God with a seal on their foreheads. We've got people to claim, people to redeem. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000. Sealed out of every tribe of people of Israel. Ah, the 144,000.
Yeah.
So 144,000 in popular culture, what does that usually have to do with it? I mean, you find end times groups of various sorts. I mean, the Jehovah's Witnesses were gathering 144,000 way back when. The Branch Davidians, who had the carnage at Waco, some decades ago, they were gathering 144,000. But what I find so interesting in this passage
is this is actually your first pop quiz of the course, to see if you were paying attention. Because look at the first 3 words of verse 4. It says, and I heard. Has John seen the 144,000? He's just heard about it. He's just heard that God is going to be redeeming this 144,000 from all of the 12 tribes. Now look, he goes down the whole list then. But in verse 9, look at the first few words of verse 9. He says, after this I looked. Because he wants to see the 144,000. It says, after this I looked, and there was a great multitude. And how many people were in it? You couldn't count them. And where did they come from? Right, every nation and all tribes and languages standing before the throne and before the Lamb, robed in white with palm branches in their hands. That is what I find so interesting here. It's the same kind of thing that we saw before. John heard about the coming of the lion, and what he saw was the Lamb. That the way in which God's promise was kept, the way in which God's power and strength were unleashed was through the Lamb. He hears about God redeeming 144,000 from the 12 tribes. What he sees is a countless multitude from every tribe and tongue and folk and nation. One of the interesting things about chapter 7 is you find out that God is not stingy. Will God save 144,000? Oh yeah. Is he going to stop there? No. I mean, is he going to save people from the 12 tribes? Oh yeah. Is he going to stop there? No. It's this kind of thing in which God's realization goes beyond imagination. I mean, is God going to save people from Asher and Gad and Naphtali and Reuben and yes. Is he going to save some people from the South Africans, the Australians, the Chinese, and the Indians? Yes. Is he going to save the Brazilians, the Argentinians, the Mexicans, and maybe even the Canadians? Maybe the Americans can even sneak in there. Who knows? Anything is possible. It talks about the scope of God's work, the reach of God's work. That who does the Creator of the world want? Who does the Creator of the world claim? Who is the Creator of the world about the business of redeeming it and through the power of the Lamb? People of every tribe and tongue and folk and nation. It becomes a breathtaking message about what God is doing in Christ. And when you realize that all of that's going on, I mean, you find that people begin to engage in this voice of praise. Verse 10, salvation to God who sits on the throne. Let all cry aloud and honor the Son. It's another one of those hymns, you know. And it goes on singing, Amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. And when things finally wrap up, after all of this scene of worship, by the time we get to chapter 8, verse 1, it says, then the Lamb opened the 7th seal, and there was silence in heaven for about a half an hour. Oh my gosh! I thought we were going to be hit with the big one, that this was going to be the annihilation of the planet. But what Revelation does is on this pounding movement, all of the kinds of threats that come hurtling off of the page, as soon as people say, and who can stand this? Let me show you who can. Those who know the power of the Lamb, the redemptive power of God. That is what empowers you, emboldens you to lift up your voice in gratitude and thanks to the work of God who remains active in the world, continuing to claim people of every tribe and tongue and folk and nation as his own. And then when all of that back in the heavenly worship scene has resolved, instead of a great cataclysm, it's a worshipful sound. Well, we better do a little bit of music, I suppose, with this. This is the last couple of verses of a Wesley hymn. Sounds like some of you may know the melody. Let's try it. It's just a paraphrase. Charles Wesley wrote this one. it starts out, ye servants of God, your master will come. Let's see if we know the melody to this one. And I've got another one. Too. Salvation to God who sits on the throne. Let all cry aloud and honor the Son. The praises of Jesus the angels proclaim. Fall down on their faces and worship the Lamb. Now the more popular version of all of this is when the saints go marching in. Because this is where you get the sun becoming dark, you get the moon turning to blood, and then the saints go marching in. And I want to be in that number, that numberless number. This is the Dixieland version of it, one of the most popular Dixieland songs ever written. They used to sing it as a funeral song, and for New Orleans funerals. They'd play it slow as they were going out to the graveyard to do the interment, and then they'd do it a little faster when they were coming back to town. Well, let me just kind of give you a peek. This is an outline of Revelation up here. And just to kind of give you a sense of what's happening here and where we're going to be going. This is the way in which Revelation works. In chapter 1, you start off in the presence of the risen Christ, who's present among the churches. You go spinning around through all of those various challenges facing the churches, whether it's complacency or harassment or whatever else. But then you're brought back into the presence of God and the Lamb, singing praises to the Creator, holy, 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 love divine, worthy is Christ the Lamb who was slain. Then you go spinning around through another series of challenges as though 1, 2, 3, 4, all of these unsettling visions take place. All of these disturbing scenes come before you. And then as they unsettle you, in terms of your own ability to find security, as they unsettle you, they bring you back into the presence of God and the Lamb. Singing salvation to God who sits on the throne for all the saints, or whatever it is. Who is this host arrayed in white? A whole bunch of songs. And over and over and over again it goes. What Revelation does is to disturb and then reassure. It unsettles us and then recenters us in the power of God and the Lamb. As you're reading the book of Revelation, if you find yourself getting bothered by some things, that's probably just fine. But don't stop there. Because if you don't end up in worship, you've stopped too soon. Because at the end of every cycle, you're brought back into the presence of God. Back to God and the Lamb, back to God and the Lamb. If we had time, we'd go spinning around through the blowing of the 7 trumpets, and we come to chapter 11, when they finally blow the 7th trumpet, and we find the kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ. And he shall reign forever and ever. The Hallelujah Chorus, the most popular piece of classical music ever composed in the entire history of the world, I think, is a shameless paraphrase of Revelation. That the Hallelujahs and the kingdom of the world all come out of this book. What I'd like to do next time is to delve a little bit further into Revelation's picture language. We'll delve into the middle of the book. I'll introduce you to the beast. You're ready for the beast? Good. You may need extra coffee for that one. So the beast in Babylon and some of those kinds of things. And to ask, what happens as Revelation is trying to picture the power of destruction? What are those agents of destruction that oppose the will of the Creator, that seek to rob the people of earth of their life and their health and their dignity? What is it for God to be involved as the Creator of all things, the Lamb as the Redeemer of all things, to do business with those powers that would seek to rob us precisely of what God has created? So that's where we'll go next time in the continuing saga.
This is very